There are moments when a person begins to see what others refuse to see. It does not come as a choice. It happens, like a crack in the surface of a long-held dream. Suddenly, the world that once appeared solid begins to tremble. The voice of authority, the voice of tradition, the voice of family and belonging, all of them lose their weight. And in that moment of seeing, a strange loneliness appears, because to see what others don't is to stand alone. Most people are not prepared for such isolation. They have been taught that safety lies in agreement, that sanity lives in the shared illusion of the crowd. We gather around our collective blindness and call it truth. We repeat words that have been passed down. We imitate gestures of devotion. We chase the same pleasures and we suffer the same fears. Believing this repetition gives meaning to life. But when one begins to see beyond that imitation, something fractures inside. The eyes no longer follow the crowd. The heart no longer responds to promises. The mind begins to taste its own emptiness, and that is dangerous, because society does not forgive those who see. The one who questions is not loved. The one who doubts the sacred formulas becomes a stranger. He is told he has lost faith, that he is arrogant, that he has betrayed his people. But perhaps it is the others who have betrayed life itself by refusing to look directly. The world we live in is built on imitation. We admire what others admire, fear what others fear, and condemn what others condemn. Our education, our religion, our relationships, all are structured to maintain the comfort of similarity. To think differently is to threaten the order of that comfort. So when someone begins to see, really see, the danger begins. Not physical danger, perhaps, though that may come too. It is the danger of being misunderstood, of being abandoned, of realizing that truth cannot be shared as belief. It can only be lived. The illusion of belonging breaks, and what remains is silence, vast and indifferent. But most flee from this silence. They return quickly to the noise of the familiar, to the laughter of others, to the warmth of belief. They tell themselves it was a mistake to doubt, a temptation of the mind. And so the dream repairs itself. The illusion closes again, like a wound that refuses to heal. Yet something remains, an aftertaste of truth, a faint echo of seeing. It cannot be forgotten. That is the seed of awakening and also the seed of danger. For once you have seen, you cannot unsee. You may pretend, you may return to your routines. You may worship and obey, but deep down, you know that what most call life is only a performance. The danger of seeing what others don't is not only social, it is psychological. It shatters the structure of the self, the me that was built through comparison, through ambition, through memory. It begins to dissolve, and as it dissolves, fear arises. The mind clings to what it knows. It clings to identity, to belief, to language, to ideology. It says, if I go further, I will lose myself, and that is true. But the self it protects is already the prison. So the question arises, why does seeing isolate us? Why is truth such a threat to relationship? Why do we prefer agreement to understanding? Because agreement is comfort. Understanding is fire. To see clearly is to burn. Through illusion, and what burns leaves no residue of self-importance. Yet humanity has worshipped the ashes instead of the flame. We celebrate the image of awakening, not awakening itself. The one who truly sees cannot belong to any group, cannot identify with any flag or doctrine. He moves through life without label, without allegiance. And that is the true danger, because the world depends on division for its order. The one who is free is beyond control. So society calls him mad, heretic, outcast. They say he has lost his way, but in truth he has stepped out of the maze. And when you step out of the maze, you see that everyone else is still running, chasing meaning through endless corridors of thought, hoping to find freedom inside the very walls that imprison them. To see what others don't is to stand at the edge of that maze, watching the game continue. You see the futility of effort, the cruelty of imitation, the sorrow of endless becoming. You want to speak, to tell them, to awaken them, but you realize words cannot awaken the sleeping. So you remain silent, and that silence becomes both your refuge and your curse, because now you live between two worlds, the world of the blind and the world that cannot be described. You cannot return, yet you cannot go forward in the same way either. The familiar roads have vanished, but no new map appears. You stand in the open, exposed, without guidance or belonging. The mind trembles at such emptiness. It wants to name, to analyze, to escape into thought, but thought is part of the old structure. It cannot enter the unknown. So the moment it moves, it carries you back into illusion. That is why most people never truly see. They interpret instead of observe. They think about life instead of living it. They talk about freedom while clinging to their chains. The illusion of understanding is stronger than ignorance itself. To say, "I know," gives a sense of solidity, a center to hold on to. But that center is built from memory, and memory is always old. It can never touch what is living now. The danger of seeing what others don't lies in this discovery, that everything you believe to be real, the self, the world, the pursuit of happiness, was only a reflection in a broken mirror. You have been worshipping the reflection, not the reality. And when the mirror cracks, you face the truth that there never was a you watching at all, only perception moving without a watcher. But such perception cannot be maintained through will or discipline. It cannot be taught or copied. It arrives when the noise of imitation ceases. It is not a reward. It is not progress. It is the collapse of progress. The human being who begins to see this faces a crisis unlike any other. It is not a crisis of politics or economics, but of identity itself, because identity is memory, and memory is time, and time cannot touch the timeless. When you begin to see beyond time, the mind screams for security. It wants continuity. It wants to know where it stands, who it is, what will happen. But there are no answers there, only silence. And in that silence, all authority ends. No teacher, no priest, no book can guide you. You are completely alone. Yet this aloneness is not loneliness. It is a vast space without center. But before it becomes clarity, it appears as terror. The old habits of the mind rush to fill the space. Beliefs, memories, ideologies, images of success and failure. They whisper, "Go back. You were safer there." And many obey. They rejoin the crowd, wear the mask again, speak the familiar words, and the world welcomes them back with applause. But deep inside, something has died. The small death of truth ignored. To see what others don't is to feel the weight of that silence pressing against every illusion. You cannot share it, because to describe it is to distort it. You cannot belong, because belonging means compromise. You cannot even comfort yourself, because all comfort comes from falsehood. So what remains? Only observation, bare, wordless, relentless. You observe your fear, your desire, your thought, your escape. You see them arise and vanish like shadows on water. You realize that the observer and the observed are one movement, not two. There is no separate you controlling the process, only seeing. And in that pure seeing, the whole machinery of illusion begins to crumble. The authority of others loses meaning. The search for validation ends. You see that the entire human drama, ambition, conflict, worship, sorrow, is the projection of a self that doesn't exist. It is a terrifying realization at first. Because without the self, who are you? Without purpose, without belief, what remains of life? The answer comes in silence. Life itself remains. Not the idea of life, not the story of becoming, but the raw fact of being, breathing, moving, perceiving. That is beyond danger, beyond loss. Yet few reach this point, because the pathless field of seeing is too empty for the human mind. It wants instruction, technique, mastery. It wants to make enlightenment another possession. But seeing is not possession, it is dissolution. The danger of seeing what? Others don't is the danger of no longer being what you were. It is the death of the known, the death of every image, every certainty, every hope. And from that death, something entirely new begins. But before it flowers, there must be the full burning of illusion. Every trace of imitation must turn to ash. Every comfort born of belonging must end. Only then can one truly stand alone, not as a hero, not as a rebel, but as a human being unbound. And that aloneness is beauty. Because only the mind that stands alone can see clearly. Only the heart that is not searching can feel deeply. Only the being that has died to the known can meet the unknown. The danger of seeing what others don't is also the possibility of living without illusion. But that possibility demands everything. It demands the ending of self-deception, the abandonment of belief, the courage to walk without a path, and most prefer the comfort of blindness. They turn away from the mirror. They say, "It is enough to dream." But the few who continue to look, who refuse to escape, discover something unspeakable. Not a conclusion, not an answer, but a stillness that is neither yours nor mine, a stillness that is untouched by thought. And in that stillness, the illusion of danger disappears. Because what is there to lose when there is no me to protect? The world may call such seeing dangerous, but only the false is threatened by truth. The real has nothing to fear. That is the end of illusion and the beginning of clarity. Why does the mind resist seeing? Why is truth such a threat to comfort, to order, to the structure of living? We say we seek truth, yet every movement of the mind is an escape from it. We pursue knowledge, build systems, accumulate beliefs, all in the name of understanding. But understanding cannot be accumulated. It is born in the moment of direct perception. Can there be seeing without the seer? Can the mind look without translating, without measuring, without judging? If it can, then truth is immediate. If it cannot, then what we call truth is only the projection of thought. So what is thought? It is memory, the residue of experience. It is time in movement, the past extending itself into the present, shaping the future. Thought says, "I know," and in that knowledge it feels safe. But that safety is illusion. Because knowledge is always old, and life is always new. The mind clings to the known because it fears the unknown. But can you ever know the unknown? If you know it, it becomes the known, and the unknown ceases to be. So to enter the unknown, the mind must be still, not controlled, not disciplined, but still by understanding its own restlessness. Is that possible? Can the mind observe itself without choice, without the observer directing the observation? Because the observer is the observed, the thinker is the thought. The division between them is an illusion created by time. When the mind sees this directly, there is no conflict. Conflict exists only when the observer resists what is seen. When anger arises, for instance, we say, "I must not be angry." That very resistance sustains anger. But when the mind simply observes anger without naming it, without condemnation, the energy of anger transforms into understanding, not through control, but through insight. Can such insight operate in all aspects of life? Not just in moments of meditation or solitude, but in the marketplace, in relationship, in sorrow and pleasure. If not, then truth becomes a luxury, something separate from daily living, and separation is illusion, seeing what others don't is not a matter of mystical experience or secret knowledge. It is the ending of illusion in the field of everyday life. But to end illusion, one must question everything, every motive, every desire, every belief, even the desire to be free, because the desire to be free is still desire. It is still movement born of the self and therefore of time. Freedom that is sought is no freedom at all. True freedom has no cause. It comes when the cause ends. But can the human mind, conditioned for centuries to seek cause and effect, ever rest without motive? Can it live without striving for something, without comparing, without becoming, We have been trained to believe that growth is virtue, that progress is sacred. But what if growth is illusion? What if the very idea of becoming better, wiser, more spiritual is the seed of endless conflict, because to become is to deny what is? When the mind sees the falseness of becoming, it stops moving in that direction, not through effort, but through understanding. Then in the stillness of no becoming there is being, and that being is not static, it is alive, fluid, immeasurable. But who will accept such a state? The world values achievement, recognition, status. We are measured by what we do, not by what we see. So to live in perception is to stand outside the structure of comparison. It is to live without identity. Can you imagine what that means, to live without identity? No nationality, no religion, no name that defines you inwardly. To see yourself not as something fixed, but as movement itself. Would that not be the end of fear? Fear exists only where the self seeks continuity. The moment you say, "I must survive as this," fear begins. But when there is no center to defend, what can be threatened? Death then loses its sting, because death belongs only to the world of the self, and the self is thought, not reality. So what is reality? Is it the world perceived through conditioning, or is it that which exists when conditioning ends? When you look at a tree, a face, a cloud, do you see what is, or do you see your image of it? The word tree stands between you and the living thing. The memory of the person stands between you and the living relationship. So in truth, you never meet life directly. You meet your idea of life. Can there be perception without idea? A look so fresh, so immediate, that it carries no shadow of the past. That is true seeing. That is what others do not see, not because they cannot, but because they will not. They are caught in the net of thought. Thought says, "I must understand," and begins to analyze, compare, conclude. But the moment of analysis is already the loss of direct seeing. Understanding is not born from thought, it is born from silence. Yet silence cannot be practiced. The practice of silence is noise. To seek silence is to fill the mind with effort. And effort is contradiction. So can the mind fall silent without seeking silence? Can thought see its own limitation and come to a natural stop? That is the essence of questioning, not to find answers, but to see clearly that every answer is part of the problem. Truth is not an answer. It is the ending of the need for answers. But the mind refuses such simplicity. It wants to control, to manipulate, to preserve itself. It asks, "How shall I live if I have no belief, no identity, no purpose?" Yet that very question comes from fear. It assumes that living must have direction, that meaning must be found in continuity. Is meaning not in the seeing itself? When you look without motive, is that not complete in itself? Does it need purpose? A flower blooms not to be admired. It blooms because blooming is its nature. In the same way, perception is the nature of a mind that is not burdened by the self. Can such perception exist in relationship? Because life is relationship. Without it, there is no living. But most relationships are based on image. The image you have of another and the image they have of you. Two images relating. Is that relationship? If you observe carefully, you will see that where image exists, love does not. Love cannot exist where there is possession, dependence, fear, or desire for comfort. So what we call love is often only attachment, a transaction of needs. Can there be love without attachment, without expectation? Not the ideal of love, but the living flame of it. It can exist only when the mind no longer clings to memory. Then love is not a product of thought. It is the essence of being. But we do not want that love. We want the pleasure of love without its vulnerability. We want its security, not its freedom. And so, once again, illusion is born. The danger of seeing what others don't is that you begin to see this everywhere, in the language of religion, in the promises of politics, in the fabric of relationship. You see the machinery of thought dressing itself as virtue. You see how every ideal, every system, every movement of reform is still caught in the old pattern of becoming. And when you see this, what can you do? Do you withdraw from the world? Do you try to change it? Do you speak, or do you remain silent? Whatever you do, if it comes from thought, it will only create more confusion. But if you act from seeing, not from idea, then your action is complete. It has no residue, no motive, no continuity. Such action is not personal. It is not your choice. It is the movement of intelligence itself. And that intelligence is not yours or mine. It arises when the self is absent. To live in that intelligence is the greatest revolution. But no one can lead you there. No method, no teacher, no philosophy can deliver it. You must see for yourself, and to see for yourself, you must question everything, including the one who questions. Because the questioner is not separate from the question. When that is seen, questioning becomes meditation. It is not analysis, it is watchfulness. And in that watchfulness, the false drops away naturally. Then, without seeking, without asking, there is clarity, not the clarity of reason or knowledge, but the clarity of pure light. It reveals, but it does not belong to anyone. That light is dangerous only to illusion. To truth, it is home. When that light begins to act, it burns away the accumulated dust of centuries. Belief, tradition, identity, all lose their grip. What was once sacred becomes transparent. What was once valuable dissolves in the presence of truth. The question then arises, can a human being live without the structure of society as it now exists? Not in rebellion, not in rejection, but in understanding. Can one live among others, yet not be bound by their illusions? Can one walk through the noise of ambition without being contaminated by it? This is not withdrawal. It is freedom in the midst of movement. To live in the world without the world living in you. But freedom cannot be divided. You cannot be free inwardly while conforming outwardly. If you conform, you are afraid. And where there is fear, there is no freedom. So can one live without fear, not by becoming fearless, not by resisting fear, but by understanding it. Fear is thought in time, the projection of what might happen. It is the shadow of memory moving into the future. When you look at fear without the movement of time, what happens? There is no tomorrow, no what if, no continuity. Fear ends because the observer who sustains it ends. You may say, but I must plan, I must act, I must survive. Of course. Practical thought has its place, but psychological thought, the endless repetition of self-concern, has none. When that distinction is seen clearly, thought falls silent where it has no use. That silence is not empty, it is full of intelligence. It acts without hesitation, without confusion. And from that silence, there is compassion, not as an emotion, but as the natural fragrance of understanding. Can such compassion guide a life? Can it replace ambition, belief, and authority? If it can, then the world would transform overnight. But it cannot be cultivated, it cannot be practiced. The moment you try to cultivate compassion, it becomes calculation. So what is left to do? Nothing, yet everything changes when the mind stops interfering. The false collapses, and what remains is the real. But this simplicity terrifies the human mind. We are conditioned to equate doing with living. To stop striving feels like death. Yet perhaps that is the only true death, the death of struggle, not of the body. Can you die to everything you know, completely, instantly, without resistance? Die to your name, your past, your achievements, your failures, your images of others? If you can, then in that dying, there is renewal. Life begins anew each moment. It is not continuity, it is creation. And creation cannot exist where the Creator stands apart. The Creator is the past. Creation is the living. To live creatively is to live without the shadow of yesterday. That is not art. It is living in total attention. Such attention is not concentration. Concentration excludes. Attention includes. In concentration, there is effort. In attention, there is ease. Attention is choiceless awareness, seeing without interference. Can you look at a thought as it arises, without saying it is good or bad? Can you watch jealousy, ambition, pleasure, fear, without a name? Then the observer disappears, and the observed transforms. This is the ending of conflict, the ending of becoming. But it requires a mind that is completely honest with itself. Honesty without motive, without reward. Because dishonesty begins the moment you seek to become something. You may ask, if all becoming ends, what is left? Is life not meaningless? But the need for meaning is itself a projection of thought. Meaning is not found. It flowers when the mind is silent. That silence is not blankness. It is alive with perception. Look at the sky after rain, the stillness of dawn, the face of a stranger. If you look without memory, the world is new. That freshness is meaning. It cannot be preserved. It must be rediscovered each moment. The danger of seeing what others don't is that you can no longer escape into false meaning. You can no longer worship the known. You can no longer participate in the comforting rituals of ignorance. You stand alone, not in isolation, but in clarity. And clarity is ruthless. It spares nothing that is false. It does not compromise. It does not negotiate. But it is not violent. It is precise, like light cutting through darkness. When you begin to live with such precision, everything changes. Your words, your gestures, your relationships, they carry a different quality. Not because you follow a principle, but because confusion has ended. And when confusion ends, right action is inevitable. But the world cannot understand such action. It wants method, explanation, system. It asks, how did you achieve this? Yet the answer cannot be given, because there was no achievement, only the ending of illusion. So questioning itself must come to an end, not through conclusion, but through exhaustion of the false. When you have asked every question, when you have seen every escape, the mind becomes utterly still. That stillness is not cultivated. It happens when questioning has burned itself out. And in that stillness, perception flowers into understanding, not the understanding of intellect, but of being. This is the end of part 2, not an answer, but a silence that contains the possibility of a different way of living. From here, clarity begins, not as belief, but as fact. There comes a moment when the questioning fades, not because answers have been found, but because the need for them has dissolved. The mind, once restless and seeking, stands still. It is no longer chasing understanding. It has become understanding itself. Out of this stillness, a new quality of perception emerges. It does not belong to thought, nor is it born from memory. It is like seeing the world for the first time. Each sound, each movement, each breath infused with quiet intensity. Nothing has changed outwardly, yet everything is different. The tree outside is still a tree. The people still walk, still speak, still dream, but the mind that looks is no longer clouded by image. The division between me and the world has ended. There is only seeing. This is not an experience to be remembered or repeated. It has no continuity, no story, no conclusion. It happens in the now, and only there. And because it has no center, it cannot be corrupted by desire or fear. The clarity that comes after illusion is not the result of effort. It is the natural state of a mind free from distortion. Effort belongs to the world of confusion. When there is no confusion, effort ceases naturally. In this silence, thought finds its rightful place. It becomes a tool, not a master. It functions where necessary, in language, in technique, in daily tasks, but it does not interfere with perception. The mind uses thought without being used by it. Such clarity is not withdrawal from life. It is deeper participation, because you are no longer interpreting life through memory. You are meeting it directly, moment by moment. Each instant is whole, complete in itself. There is no longer the burden of the past, nor the anxiety of the future. The Movement of becoming has stopped, and what remains is being. Being is not static, it is alive, immeasurable. It has no name, no opposite. It is not pleasure, not happiness, not achievement. It is the stillness of a flame that burns without fuel. To live in this clarity is to live without resistance. Not in passive acceptance, but in awareness so total that nothing is rejected, nothing is held. The mind flows with what is, not against it, and in that flow, conflict disappears. Have you ever watched a river move? It meets obstacles, but it never stops. It bends, it deepens, it widens. It has no resistance, only movement. That movement is its nature. In the same way, when the mind is free, it moves with life, not in reaction but in harmony. Harmony is not conformity, it is not agreement. It is the complete absence of contradiction. That absence is peace, not the peace of escape or control, but the peace that comes when struggle ends. In such peace, love appears, not the love of possession or desire, but the love that has no object. It does not belong to anyone. It is like light. It shines because it is its nature to shine, and that light illuminates everything it touches without choice. To see this love is to see life in its totality. It is not romantic, not sentimental, not personal. It is intelligence expressing itself as care, as compassion, as humility. Where this love exists, comparison dies. Because love does not measure, it only understands. Now, when others look at you, they may still see danger. They may call you detached, indifferent, unfeeling. But that is because they live in the noise of attachment and cannot recognize silence when they see it. To them, silence is emptiness, but to you, it is fullness beyond measure. Clarity is not lonely. It is aloneness, but not isolation. Isolation is the product of fear. Aloneness is the expression of freedom. To be alone is to be whole. From this wholeness, relationship becomes something entirely new. It is not the meeting of two fragments seeking completion. It is the dance of two complete beings, sharing the space of awareness. Such relationship has no dependence, no need, no conflict. It is communion, not through words but through understanding, and when there is communion, time ceases, because time belongs to thought and love is timeless. This is the state of clarity, not as an attainment, but as a fact. It cannot be preserved. The moment you try to hold it, it dies. The moment you name it, it becomes memory. So clarity lives only in the living moment. Can such living continue in the world of noise and ambition? Yes, but only when the inner movement of becoming has ended. You still work, still speak, still move through the world, but without the burden of self. There is action, but no actor. There is doing, but no doer. And that absence of the me is the greatest intelligence, because all corruption begins with the me. The me wants power, recognition, security. When the me ends, all that ends with it. This ending is not destruction, it is creation. Out of the ashes of the known, something entirely new arises. Not of your making, not of your will. It moves by itself like the wind. You cannot capture the wind, you can only feel it pass through you. In the same way, you cannot possess truth, you can only live it. And when you live it, you no longer ask what others see or do not see, because the very question implies separation. There is only seeing, undivided, whole. The danger of seeing what others don't was never in the seeing itself, but in the resistance to it. When resistance ends, danger ends. What remains is clarity, silent, simple, incorruptible. Look now. The world moves as it always has, people seeking, fighting, desiring. But you who have seen no longer belong to that movement. You walk through it, but it cannot touch you, not because you are protected, but because there is no center to be attacked. You are not above the world, nor outside it. You are the world, without division. The seeing and the seen are one. And in that oneness, there is immeasurable beauty. Not the beauty of form or idea, but the beauty of being. It does not come from you, it flows through you as the river flows through the valley. It asks nothing, it seeks nothing, it is. When the Mind stands utterly still. The mystery of existence unfolds, not as knowledge but as wonder, wonder that does not ask why, wonder that is complete in itself. That wonder is sacred, not because it belongs to religion, but because it is untouched by thought. It is the purity of perception when the self has ended. This is the clarity beyond danger, the clarity of a mind that has walked through illusion, through questioning, through death, and come to silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but of fullness without boundary. Nothing can be added to it, nothing can be taken away. It is the total. And in that totality, there is no longer the one who sees what others don't. There is only seeing.